Okay, yeah, we're good. All right, I just want to say also, it's in Hebrew, the page, which was a request, which is also great. And I'll read, I'll explain, and I'm not sure where everybody's at, and I understand it's a large community, which is great. So if I over-explain or under-explain, so please, I apologize, Meirosh, and you could always fine-tune me. Feel comfortable to either ask me to explain further or to say, get on with it already, I'm good with anything. Okay, I'm going to start us off, and obviously we're not going to read everything on the page. You can take it home with you. You can read it afterwards on Shabbat or something like that. But I want to start us off with a little bit of an introduction to the topic of two aspects of tefillah, and with just a beautiful Meshech Chachma that's in Meshech Chachma was of Meir Simcha Cohen Mitvinsk. That's in Lita, Lithuania, beginning of 1900s, I guess. So there we go. He's interesting, by the way, just that he's a brilliant, until today he's a basic, the Meshech Chachma also wrote Or Sameach on the Rambam. Until today, the Or Sameach is one of a basic commentary on the Rambam that still is around after 100 years, even though there's a lot of things written on the Rambam. It's a cute story on the fact that he first came up with his Perush on the Torah called the Meshech Chachma, which is very, like you can see, it really spans across different things. And he always brings proofs from throughout Shas, throughout the Talmud. The story is, though, that, and it's really extremely well accepted and still learned today, the story on it is, though, that he wanted to print it, publish it as a young man, and his father-in-law gave him advice and said, if you first put out a book on Chumash, so they'll say, okay, so you made a commentary on the Chumash, but they won't give it the same respect as if you first put out a book on Lumdus, on the Gemara, on the Rambam, put that out, print that first, then you get that name, and then when you publish yours on the Chumash, it'll be even better received, which is what he did, actually. Here we go. So, in Parshat Vayechi, at the end of Sefer Bereshis, Yaakov is on his deathbed. Yosef brings his kids, Ephraim and Menashe, to Yaakov, and Yaakov says that Ephraim and Menashe, Reuven v'Shimon Yuli, that they'll be just like my sons, my grandkids. Ephraim and Menashe will be just like my sons. What does he mean? He's moving them up. They're getting an upgrade. They become like the Shvatim. And that's why Yosef, it's not like this Shevet Yosef, but it's Shevet Ephraim and Menashe, which also means what? That Yosef got a double portion. In other words, here you see an example of where Yosef is getting that double portion because he steps in to be the Bechor in respect to that aspect. So Yaakov says, and this is at the very top of the page, V'ani natati lachem shchem echad alachecha, and asher lakachtem miyad ha'emori b'charbi v'kashti, I gave you, now Rashi says shchem echad can be an extra portion, and that's the reference to that which he accepted Ephraim and Menashe as being tribes. But the other understanding of Shechem Echad is that it means specifically Shechem, the city of Shechem. What are we talking about? In the pasuk it says that I gave you, Yaakov speaking, and he says, I'm giving to you, Yosef, Shechem, the city of Shechem, more than your brothers, that I took from the Amorites, b'charbi u'b'kashti, with my sword and with my bow and arrow. So what's he referring to exactly? So Rashi says it's based on a medrash. What was Yaakov's concern when Shimon and Levi walked into Shechem? That they're going to come and attack me. What do we need that for? So the medrash says that's exactly what happened. All the Amorites from around the city of Shechem came and attacked Yaakov and the brothers. They were successful, obviously with the help of God in battling them off. And that's what Yaakov is referring to over here. He says, and I got Shechem from the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. And that's what he was giving over to Yosef. Yosef, in fact, is buried in Shechem. So here it's interesting. It's Gimel. It's the third, it's the very top of the page, but it's the Gimel, Meshech Chachman Bereshis, B'charbi v'kashti, Tergem Unkelus. So the Aramaic explanation of the commentary to the Chumash says, what is Charbi v'kashti? B'tzluti u'b'ba'uti. What is tzluti? Says the Meshech Chachma, Hu Seder Tfilah HaKfua. That's the organized formal tfilot. And Ba'uti is going to be Bakashot, when we have our personal requests. So we say that in the morning, right? Titkabel, slow tone, ubahu tone, the Chol Beis Yisrael, Kadom Avayim. It's part of the Kaddish, Hashalem. We always say that. That's the Lashon, that the Cherib is comparable to the Tzaluta, to the formal prayers, and the Bakashot is going to be comparable, and the Keshet is going to be, the bow and arrow is going to be comparable to our personal tefillah, our personal requests.
Yaakov bought Shechem. Didn't he pay for Shechem? Always said that there was no
That is true. That is true. Shechem itself is bought in the, I guess, the surrounding, I guess the area as it, on the whole is, you had to go to the battle with. But it could be, that's a good question. So is it that it happened afterwards? We're talking about the burial plot itself? I don't know. Tzorchian. Good question.
A piece of property in Shechem, not the entire.
I think it's the burial plot. Yeah, but still, I mean, we'll have to, that could be a possible answer. Right. I think you're right. Yeah, I know. Excuse me? Yeah, but here it's saying, he's asking that, I forget your name, sir. Mordechai? Yeah, he's saying that it's, but here Yaakov's saying I had to get it with in battle.
Just because you buy something doesn't mean everyone accepts it.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any reason why you mentioned bow and arrow specifically?
Oh, it's excellent. So Meshech Chachma is going to address your question. Why is it that the formal prayers are being compared to the sword, and why is it that our requests, our personal requests, are being compared to the bow and arrow? So Meshech Chachma here says the following. It's very interesting. He says there's differences in halacha between nafka minas lahalacha, differences in the practical application of the halacha between the formal prayers and the personal requests. What's going to be the difference? Formal prayers, I don't necessarily have to know exactly what I'm saying. Believe it or not. In other words, I don't have to have complete intent, kavanah. It works anyway. I'll explain why in a second. Whereas personal prayers, you better for sure know what you're saying, otherwise they're not going to be very successful. The understanding of it usually is that who put together the formal prayers? It's funny because we were talking about this. Who put together the formal prayers, like Shmona Esrei? Who puts them together? It comes right, Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, at the very beginning of the Second Temple period. So everyone coming back from Bavel, and you have within it the great men of the Great Assembly. Included in that, 120 sages, you also had prophets, Nevi'im. And therefore, the formula that was used in order to create the Shmona Esrei, that formula has a little bit of prophetic prophecies within it. In other words, the wording was chosen specifically because whether or not you understand it 100%, you are having effects. This gets metaphysical, but you're having effects upon the greater realms, and it's going to make a difference in what's going on in this world. So therefore, we say, as long as you have kavanah, you have intent, at the very beginning of the Shmona Esrei, then even if your kavanah wanes throughout the West, you can still be, rest of the Shmona Esrei, you can still be yotzei. You can still be, it'll be acceptable. The very first bracha you're establishing, like you have an understanding, you're standing in front of God, and then the rest really moves along. So that means even if your kavanah is lax, or even if you don't really understand the words 100%, it's still going to be an acceptable Shmona Esrei. When it comes to your personal requests, you're the one who's writing those up, and you better know what you're saying, and you better say it with intent. Otherwise, what kind of a request is it? So that's the differences. So the Meshech Chachma points out the following. So brilliant. This is a great word for the Shabbos table. He says what? A sword has inherent power. It's sharp. It's inherently dangerous, or it's inherently strong. Like if you touch the sword the wrong way, you'll get a nick on your finger. So that means there's an inherent power within it. It has nothing to do with you and with the with the strength that you wave that sword. So that's comparable to the formal prayers, because formal prayers have an inherent strength. It was put in there by the prophets, by the Nevi'im. That's why also people are very makbid on their nusach, because the nusach, we feel it goes back to when the prophets put into with Anshe Knesset HaGedolah in the nusach of the tefillah. But a bow and arrow, remember from way back to summer camp, right? The bow and arrows, why do they let kids play with bow and arrows at summer camp? Because nothing happens. You could hit the top of an arrow all day long. You're not going to get hurt. It's blunt kind of. It's a little bit of a spitz, but it's blunt. What gives it the strength? When you pull back the string of the bow and shoots the arrow. The strength that you get to that to that arrow comes from what you put into it. And the same thing with personal requests. When you put your heart into it, your strength into it, your kavanah intent, that's gonna be a good, acceptable prayer. And that's why the personal requests are comparable to the bow and arrow, whereas the regular formal prayers are comparable to the sword. The Kutzker Rebbe used to say that it's cute. It's straight off what is it with the bow and the arrow? That the closer you bring the string to your heart, the farther the arrow will fly. And exactly that's the same thing with our personal prayers. The more it comes from the heart, then the farther it's going to go. So we understand this is what we call it. In other words, our prayers are termed to be one of our strongest weapons of the Jewish people. Is the cherev and the keshet, is the prayers. Our swords is our prayers. Very helpful. And we understand that. So I want to take a look today at two aspects of tefillah. How does it work? What's the mechanism that gives strength to our prayers? There are two different approaches on the page. I'm sure there's other approaches, but I want to share with you these two. One is that of the Maharal. The other one is of the Nefesh HaChaim. And in each time we'll start out with something. We'll start out with a question. We'll develop the fundamental idea, and then come to the conclusion, and then start with the next one. So we're going to begin with the Maharal. This is number 1 on your page. The Maharal starts off. Who's the Maharal? Rabbi Yehuda Lau, right? The Lowy family. Those are all. That goes back to the Maharal. So he was in the 1500s. He was the Rav in Prague, lived to, I think, a ripe old age of 97. We saw start the Acharonim period in the 1500s. The Maharal, though, he definitely looked at himself as being a Rishon. He argues with Tosfos. The Maharal is such a basic. He's one of the first to be able to take down like the more of the esoteric kind of ideas and place it down in his Sfarim. He has many, many Sfarim, and they're really very fascinating. They've been annotated. It's not right here as a set. That's by a fellow named Hartman. Really opened up the Maharal to everybody to be able to learn, and I highly suggest it. So let's take a look.
Is the book Practical Judaism by Rabbi Lau? Is that the same person?
No, it's going to be a different one.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Okay, number 1. Says the Maharal, I got a good question for you. If a person is meritorious, he's fitting, has the merit that he should receive something from God, that he's God will give it to him without prayer. A lot of stuff that we get, we don't even ask for. It's just presented to us. And if he doesn't have the merit to get that he's requesting, in Cain, so even if he prays for it and asks for something, just because he davens, he's going to receive it. That's the paradox of the Maharal. He says, like, it doesn't, if you deserve it, you usually will get it without asking. If you don't deserve it, so what's going to help you to go ahead and ask in your prayers? Good question of the Maharal. So the Maharal has a nice explanation. In order for us to appreciate his answer, we're going to take a little bit of a tour discussing, and I mentioned to Daniela, I said that I'm really, might not be doing justice. We might have to come revisit these topics. But just quickly to get a basic idea on it, the Maharal, we're going to look at what his opinion is on how he defines Yirat Hashem, fear of God, Avat Hashem, love of God, and then we'll get into his understanding of what tefillah does. And that'll be the approach of the Maharal, and then we'll reset the table. So it says the following, the Maharal. First of all, let's start with the Rambam, actually, his definition of Yirat Hashem. Anybody remember that Rambam? How does the Rambam define, how would you define fear of God? How does one develop fear of God? Manyan, huh?
Well, I started out looking at the heavens, and I'm...
Oh, excellent. The Rambam's going to quote what you just said, actually. Look at this, number 2 on the page. Hakela nichbad v'nora hazeh. So, this lofty God, mitzvah la'avov li'yaroto, we have a commandment to love him and to fear of him, and he brings psukim. Next paragraph. Hechi aderech la'avato v'yirato. So what's the method, the manner in order to achieve love and fear of God? When a person looks around at God's creations, and he sees the unaccessible wisdom that God has, which is infinite, Miyad hu ohev, and Rambam here waxes poetic. Hu ohev, he loves and mishabech and praises and mefayer, praises mitaven, desires tava gedolah, a great desire leida Hashem hagadol, and he just has this great love to get closer to God. We talk about in our days. We say, I think down in Asia they talk about book of the God of design. I think that's the terminology that you look around the world. I'm sure we have sitting amongst us, if we have any biologists or physicists sitting in this room at this point, I studied biology when I was in college. Okay, that was like my, that's your introduction to God. Some people have other methods, but for me it's the God of design. This is like cheesy. We say cheesy. What do we say in this country? You don't say cheesy. How would you, what happens when you look into an electron microscope? What do you see in there? You see HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? You see God, right? Something could be multiplied 200,000 times, and it's still there. There's another separate little entity. That's how I remember that. I got an electron microscope one time. They took us in. It's amazing. That's the Rambam talks about this idea. So a person wants to get to know God because of that. God of design. Some other people might be something else. I don't know, in this room we might have people, just go ahead, shout it out. I don't know, this is too formal a room for me. It's the chairs and everything. But what gets a person? Jewish history? Jewish history sometimes does it for people. All right, I forget what it is. King Kaiser Wilhelm, is it? The story that he asks the court priest, he says, give me a proof that there is God, and the priest says back to him, the Jews, my lord, the Jews. Ever hear that one? It's a famous word. Because the history of the Jewish people defies all of the natural norms.
But there's another proof if you believe in science.
Yeah?
If you believe in the science of physics, matter can either be created or destroyed. It can only be changed in form. So if you believe in the Big Bang Theory, where did the original matter and energy come from?
Correct. Excellent.
It had to come from something that's outside that circle.
That's correct.
Philosophers will also, I think, tell you the same thing.
At what point in eternity did this 6,000 years of this world get fit in? Beats me. I don't know, keeps me up at night, right?
From a source that's outside the bounds of physics.
That's right. And the ever-expanding universe is expanding into what?
Into what? It doesn't matter, but the initial had to come from somewhere outside.
Right. So that's how you're relating to that aspect. You're a physicist, or you have that kind of a mind.
I was a computer programmer analyst, but I studied physics, studied biology, because my degree was medical computer science. So all like you talk to people, different things that bring them to it. Okay, so that's what the Rambam says. Now the Rambam over here says that we look around the world, and that's the idea of Ava. So that's what's going to be fair. I'm on the third line. Kamosha Amar David, as David said, Sama nafshi lelokim lekel chai, that my soul thirsts for HaKadosh Baruch, for God, lekel chai, to the living God, which is usually a reference to when you see God within our world. And when you think about these things, miyadhu nirta lachora. So again, the Rambam now waxes poetic once more. All of a sudden, you think about this so much, the grandness of God, so you fall back in fear, v'yifached, and you get frightened, v'yodeya, and you know, shubir yakatana, shafela, afela, that you're a very small, minute little creation, omedet b'dat kala me'uta, and you're standing with such a limited mind, lifnei tamim deyot, in front of that which is the perfected intelligence. Kamosha Amar David, as David said, this is what you, sir, in the back said, the pasuk, when I look at your heavens, the handiwork of your fingers, so what is mankind that should be even mentioned in the same breath over here? So that's the Rambam's approach. I'm going in, coming closer to God because of the fear, the Ahavas Hashem, and then all of a sudden I fall back in fear because of the recognition of myself as being so puny, so small. We're going back and forth. Now you get distance from God, and what happens? You get the desire to come back in. So you're constantly going back and forth. Holoch v'shov. That's very beautiful. We actually say this, by the way, in one of the brachot. What happens when you hear thunder? What do you say? Baruch atah Hashem, you God. Elokeinu melech haolam, I'm speaking to you, second person. What do we say? Second person. Shekochacha ugvuratcha. Shekocho. What happened? What happened in that bracha? It flipped terms. All of a sudden I go over to Shekocho Gvurato Moleolam, which is third person. The grammar's off. Baruch atah shekochacha. No, that's not what happens. So they like to say it's like the Rambam. In other words, Baruch atah Hashem, I'm talking to God in second person, coming in close, and then at some point, all of a sudden, I fall back in fear, and then I go into third person, shekocho gvuratam alei olam. That's the Rambam's approach.
How do you describe fear?
So how do you describe fear according to the Rambam?
I don't know. I know there's an overpowering control of everything,
Yeah.
and I respect it. So what's fear?
Good. Oh, sir, we're going to take your point. We're going to get to that in about 10 minutes now. Excellent. Excellent.
I'm a believer.
Right. So the Rambam's describing something that a person actually has gotten his head so much into Kadosh Baruch Hu that he recognizes how puny he is.
Yeah.
But that does not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to come to that conclusion.
You don't have to be. Fear is being scared.
Right. So
Fear is also awe.
So,
To be in wonder.
right, in wonder. So if you say fear as being scared, that on the Pirush, the Rambam's not going that way. That's like, he says that's like babyish,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm frightened because if I step out of line, I'm going to get smacked.
The boogeyman.
Yeah, or I'll get punished.
Yeah.
And and the lower level is also if I do a mitzvah. Why am I doing the mitzvah?
Get a reward.
I get a reward. That's like really like low level. That's really looking not relating to God. It is, but it's relating to myself. What's in it for me? The word awe is correct as far as, that's what they usually say within the Rambam. I'm awe-inspired. What does it mean, awe-inspired?
Wow.
You're like, wow, but it sets up that distance between you and Hashem. That's what seems to be the Rambam. Okay? If we take that as being the definition of the Rambam, so let's take a look at the Maharal then. Number 4 on the page. We're going to do a cryptic Gemara, and just to make sure we move along. This is challenging with the time. So, just to make sure that we move along, some of the Maharal we'll do outside, but I want to do number 4 on the page, a cryptic Gemara. It's beautiful. Ve'amar Rabbi Chanina, the Gemara Masechet Brachot, Hakol b'idei Shamayim, everything's in the hands of heaven, chutz miyirat Shamayim, except for fear of heaven. Right? Shenemar, it says, this is Moshe speaking to the Jewish people. What does he say? Ata Yisrael, Jewish people, Ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimcha. Mimach. What is it that God asks of you? Ki im liyirah. How do you define that in English? Anybody want to take the challenge? Ki im liyirah.
Respect.
But to have fear. All I ask of you is just have fear.
Yeah, but you don't
Or respect, or just have
you
awe.
don't want to use the
Because if
term
it's fear, then you
fear.
don't have free
It's not
choice.
appropriate.
Okay, so what are you going to do? Just have awe. Ki im. But is that ki im is a word that usually means, well, is it like, just one, this one little thing. Ki im, but, that's all it is.
With Eve.
Im over here is going to be im liyiras with the aleph. So it's going to be, it's going to be but, it's not going to be with, it's going to be ki im liyira, but to have, but to be. So the Gemara says like this, the pasuk saying that all I ask of you is just this one little thing, ki im. So the Gemara says, Atu yirat shamayim milta zutra tahi? Wait a second, is fear of heaven such a small matter? That's what it sounds like it's saying in the pasuk. V'amar Rabbi Chanina mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. He says, Ein lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'beikin hazav ela otzer shel yirat shamayim. All that God keeps in his storage house is just fear of heaven. So says the Gemara, Shneimar yirat Hashem otzer. Says the Gemara, yes, you're right. L'gabe Moshe milta zutra tehi. As far as Moshe is concerned, it's a small matter. What kind of answer is that? Why does that not sit well with you? What was the Gemara's question?
So if you're referring to Moshe, his relationship with Hashem
Yes.
is a lot different from Joe Average.
And who's Moshe speaking to here? Joe Average. He's saying Jewish people, all I ask of you is but to have fear of God. So the Gemara is saying, for Moshe it was easy. It doesn't answer my question. Why is Moshe saying, all I ask of you is but to have fear of God? So the Gemara says, mashal. I'll make it all clear. Here's the mashal. Tamar Rabbi Chanina. I'll give you a mashal. How do you say mashal in English? An example, a parable. Thank you. If you ask somebody of a large utensil, v'yesh he has it, dome elav k'kli katan, and then it's like to him, it's like nothing. It's like a small little utensil. You ask a farmer, hey, can I borrow the tractor? He says, yeah, sure, no problem. The keys are on the hook. But a katan, you ask a small little utensil, the ein doesn't have it, dome elav k'kli gadol. Then it's like a big thing. You got a splinter, and you're running around the dormitory. Do you have a pinsare, a tweezer? You have a tweezer. Nobody has a tweezer. You're going crazy because they got that splinter. It's killing you. It's a small little nothing. Nobody has it. So it's all of a sudden dome elav. It's like you're missing the worst thing. Good parable? Does it explain everything? Nothing. Right, so what does it explain? What's going on over here? So again, keeping an eye on the clock, we're going to talk about the Maharal. We're just going to do number 5 of the Maharal. It says the following. Maharal it's similar, I don't know if it argues on the Rambam, I don't think, but he's going to use different terminology. It says the Maharal number 5. V'zeki kfar amarnu, ki etzem hayira masha adam olul el ha'ilah. It's not the being awe-inspired, but it's more of, what would you say, on recognition that a person is a creation from the Creator. V'hu amitata yira, and that's what yira is. Yira is not from the lashon of fear, but more so from an awareness. Ubamasha adam hu alul eino nechshav l'klum, and that which a person is a creation, he is not considered much, let's say, l'klum b'mashu alul tolebi l'to. He's completely dependent on a kadosh baruch hu. The fact of our existence, we're dependent on Hashem. Ubamasha eino klum davar zeino mitzad ilah ki elah baro v'otziyoto el ha'po'al. The fact that we're not consequential, let's say in the big terms. Everybody's such a special person, otherwise you wouldn't be here in this world. God wouldn't put you here if you didn't have a lot to contribute to this world. But in the grand picture of things, we're not consequential. And therefore, the awareness of God is not in God's hand. That's up to us to be able to have that kind of an understanding. This is an idea that a person just has to think about a little bit. The Ramban talks about it at length, where at the end of the creation story on the 6th day, says the Ramban, that, what's the pasuk? Vayar Elokim es kol asher hasavi hinei tov ma'od. Right? And God took a look around in the 6th day. Takes a look around at all of the creation after 6 days, and he says, "Whoa, hinei tov ma'od. Look how beautiful it is." I remember Rav Shechter Shir used to use the analogy, in parable, that a guy's painting. They got a painter and they're putting it together, and then they take a step back when the painting's finally finished. They go, voila. It took me the longest time to know that viola means voila. Voila. Paradigm is a paradigm. Okay, so he says, voila, look at the painting, how beautiful it is. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what does it say? Vayar Hashem es kol asher asai. On the 6th day, he takes a look at the creation. He says, wow, this time it came out good. Hinei tov ma'od. What, Hashem didn't know what he was doing all that time? So what's the Ramban say? Right there in the 6th day, Vayar. What's Vayar mean? It's a deep perception, meaning Kadosh Baruch Hu is putting in, Hashem knew what he was doing. He's putting into the creation. God's creating ex nihilo. It's coming out of no, yesh me'ayin. So now we have the physical creation, but what's going to keep that physical creation in place? Wasn't it stop? Why doesn't it just go kablooey after that original creation? Obviously, it's God's intent that things should stick around, that physicality should still remain. So that's the vayar that we have over there. God takes a look. In other words, it's a perception, meaning in our terms, that you're going to keep this world functioning. It doesn't go kablooey on us. We say that every morning in davening. Where do we say that? This exact point though. Ha-mechadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tabid ma'aseh breishis. Right? We say that right in the first bracha before Kriyat Shema. What does that mean? Not ha-mechadesh b'tuvo, the God in His goodness. This goes back to Ramchal stuff. Ha-mechadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamid. That constantly, tamid, every day God doesn't say that He's mekaying the bria. He's mechadesh, chidush. Constantly, constantly, all the time. There's a chidush of the world. The fact that we exist this second is not a given. We existed last second, but the fact that we're still over here in this second is because God recreates constantly. The act of creation. That's that ratzon that Hashem has that's in this world. So the Maharal goes at length to discuss this point, and he's saying constantly that this is an idea that that's an awareness. It's an awareness of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's an awareness of your place in relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's something that, you got to think about and recognize that you're totally dependent on God, because from one second to the next, you shouldn't be here. If I'm like this and I'm moving my hand around, that's because God is constantly allowing me to be here and do so. It comes out really phenomenal if I have a light switch and on Shabbat, I'm going now to turn off the light, but God doesn't want me to. I'm rebelling against God by turning off the light. That means God is keeping me together so I can rebel against Him.
Potentially.
When I'm doing it, then I am. That's called Gvurot Hashem. That's a Gvura. To be able to allow people to rebel against you don't squash them. That's part of the Gvura. So that's the Maharal. He harps on this. So it's not fear. It's sort of awe, but not awe. It's not necessarily against the Rambam, but you're not falling back. You just have a greater awareness of what HaKadosh Baruch was about and where you fit in. I'm totally dependent on Hashem. Very creation is all of creation is dependent upon God, and I constantly remember that. What in that case? Yes.
Yeah, I want to ask a question about what you said just a couple of seconds beforehand.
Yeah.
When you said Hashem took a look around and he said, Tov Ma'od.
Yes.
Can that assume that previously God had produced other worlds that he was not happy with and were destroyed?
Excellent. Excellent. There is a medrash that says exactly that. I could bring it for you next time they invite me back, Nobody throws tomatoes. I think it's Rabbi Abahu. It's a medrash that says exactly that point on these words, Hinei Tov Ma'od. Wow, this one really came out good. Does that mean that God didn't know? This will fit into your dinosaurs and all that. You could take this in a lot of places. Rav Soloveitchik, in the book, he's quoted where? In the book that Rabbi Rokefet wrote, Rav Rothkopf Rokefet. It's a beautiful story. I'm going to ruin it because I should bring it inside, but I can't help myself. He talks about that the Rav is saying, when he started the school of Maimonides, he talks about what's the message of the creation of worlds and destruction of the world. He says, the Rav, it could be that those previous worlds maybe were even prettier than our world. We don't know. But Hashem wants this. This is Tov Ma'od. This is what He wants. So there's the Rav. It could be that you're looking back over your shoulders and something was even greater. But we have the demand upon us to take what is given us and to create with it and to and to perfect it. So it could be that's his mup. He says that he's walking through this hallways of Maimonides up in Boston, which the Rav started, and he hears the kids breaking their teeth on the simple psukim and the Rashis. We all grew up in America without Hebrew being our natural tongue. And he says, he remembers the days when the Rav grew up, that he writes, and I was spending whole nights arguing with Rav Chaim Ozer Grudzinski on Pshat, with his grandfather, Rav Chaim Ibrisky. He's going through that. The Rav says, and here they're wrestling with the simple Chumash and Rashi. So he says, and that's beautiful. We take the world that we have. Maybe I'm looking back, and it was even better. But that's the lesson, he says, of the destroyed worlds and the created worlds. This is the world that we have. We have to appreciate it, and we have to grow with it. We have to build it, and that's the Tov Ma'od. You're right.
But destroyed it. Why are we? How? If that's what God wants?
I don't know. I don't ask about God, but the Medrash at least is giving over that message that there was worlds. It's a Medrash that says there were worlds beforehand, and now this one is Zed, and he says Zed Tov. You're saying we have to crack our heads on it.
Absolutely.
So much more to learn. Okay, yeah. I think I'm going to have to...
You're not going to be
Okay.
able to stop.
Yeah.
That medrash is in Medrash Rabbi.
Yes.
In Bereshis. And also another medrash is in the same area. That's a few parakim later. Where it says about he created words and destroyed them. Then it says he stachel v'oraita bara alma, right? Kodesh Baruch Hu looked in the Torah and used that as the plan for how the world was created. So the question comes immediately, you mean he didn't look in the Torah for all the other worlds? He doomed them, so to speak, to failure by not building according to the ultimate emes, which we believe is Torah. So it's a little hard to explain. So in my Niyataiti, I tried to explain, to say there were no worlds that were built and destroyed, built and destroyed. There was only one world, and it was built Istak B'Oraita Ubara Alma. But what is? Every time man failed to live up to what the maximum was possible, he lost that ability, and he was down a notch. The world, the expectation of man was not what it was before he failed that thing. And that's what it's trying to tell us, that's what the Kodesh Baruch does. And we see that with Moshe Rabbeinu when he smashed the Luchot, the first Luchot, and he smashed the first Luchot. Why? How could he do something like that? It was created by the Kodesh Baruch Hu. B'Yad Hashem wrote it himself, how he had dared to do that. But if you step back a little and you say, well, it was just a stone before that. Every stone was created by the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So what are you giving special character to this? And so the fact is that what makes something better and special is its purpose. If the purpose is a lofty purpose, it's more special. If it has a relatively simple purpose, then it's not. And so the first luchos were made to, if we had lived up to them, we would have lived on a very, very high spiritual level, and basically it would be in Gan Eden from start to finish. But since we failed, Moshe Rabbeinu saw these luchos were no longer applicable to Am Yisrael because they blew it. And so he's destroyed them and created another set of luchos that would give them a chance to aspire to that level, but at least it was a possibility.
Fair. Okay. Fair. Good. We should do one morning just on that medrash alone. So much still. Okay. Let's we are going to try to put in. Okay. The Maharal. So let's just finish up the Maharal. According to the Maharal, in number 6. Okay, number 6. So I'm just going to talk out outside. The discussion, again, we can do this maybe at some other point, we'll develop it further. But if you think about it, that's our definition according to Maharal of Yira, is like, let's say, God awareness. Oh, how's that the mushal? So what's the mushal that they said about the tractor, right? You have a big utensil, if you ask for it, you got it, it's like a little thing. So it's this idea also. If you go over to somebody and you say, hey, do you have that God awareness? Or somebody does have God awareness, and you recognize that everything is dependent upon the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and the whole world's existent constant because of Hashem. The fact that I breathe is because, is a sign that Kodesh Baruch Hu is keeping me here. So do you have that God awareness? So the person will say, yeah, of course, what's the big deal? Yeah, what are you telling me? That's obvious, right? It's a small thing. If you walk over to somebody who's running through life without that kind of an awareness, and therefore doesn't have that awareness as a defining, as a defining motivation in their life, then, and there are people like that, then they're, unfortunately, what would you say? They're missing out on one of the crucial lessons of life, on something very big. So it's on some level, it's a small thing. If you get it, you get it. It's not that you didn't tell me like it wasn't like a sugya in the Gemara in Bava Metzia. But on the other hand, if so, when you get it, you get it. But if you don't have it, then you're missing out on something very, very special. So that's what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara says it's like if you go and ask somebody for a very large thing, and he got it, it's like a small thing for him. If you ask somebody, and if you ask him, and he doesn't have it, it's a small thing, really. The idea is small, conceptually, but then it's like they're missing everything, the big thing. That's what the Gemara was saying over here. According to the Maharal, that's its understanding of Yira, of God awareness. What's going to be, therefore, according to the Maharal, the concept of Ahava, love of God? Where's that going to fit in? We had in the Rambam that he gets called in, he gets close to God because he wants to know Hashem's infinite wisdom, and then he falls back in fear. The Rambam does say near Tachor, he falls back in fear. But according to the Maharal, what is happening according to the Maharal? And then, so he goes back and forth, love and fear. According to the Maharal, it's going to be something different. According to the Maharal, what's the definition of love? That's the challenge. And what I think I'm going to do, I'm just watching the time, what I think I'm going to do,
is that we're going to finish up today with the Maharal. We're going to continue with the Maharal, develop it, and we'll stop here and I'll ask Daniela if I could come back some other time for us to do the other aspect of prayer. She actually said that that's a possibility if I want it. I think we'll do that. It's better than rushing through. Let's just discuss the Maharal, Ahava, they get the Tefillah, and that's what we'll do today. And if it's okay, we'll do the other aspect at some other point. Say there?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, yes.
I'm having a lot of trouble tying what you're saying with the Maharal into what you said, what the introduction to these.
My introduction with Meshech Chochmah
Yeah.
was just totally an introduction to talk about prayer because I like that Meshech Chochmah.
Oh, so it isn't.
It's not, no, that was like, it doesn't even have numbers next to it.
Right.
The share really starts with the Maharal.
Okay.
Okay? That should be. What would you say? So like if you ask people, like, give me a definition of love, love is ... So most of the time you Google it, I've Googled it. I should have brought me there's a good Woody Allen on it. But if you think about it, most of the time it's not going to be definitions. It's just descriptions. The Gemara itself says love is like, what is it that, there's always enough room or something like that, you know? There's always, what is it? Always enough room in the room. There's never crowded or something. What is definitions of love? So the Maharal says the following. This is the Maharal's. He gives definitions. It's an old discussion about whether or not opposites attract or likes attract. The Maharal weighs in very, very clearly on this. Opposites repel. Opposites repel. And he says that the idea, though, if you see sometimes opposites, let's say I have water and dry ground. You'd say that that's dry and water, that's opposites. Not opposites. What is that? When you bring the two together, then you have the mixture, then you have the perfection.
Except the magnetism.
Yeah. So take a look at the Maharal, therefore, number 7. This is going to be his definition, and we're going to apply it. Number 6. V'chei mashu mishtokei kacham. This is in his Nativ Avat Hashem. Number 6. V'chei mashu mishtokei acham l'kar, harei akar hu hashlamato. That when it's too hot and you want to have cooler, so that's going to be that you're trying to go towards perfection. The two come together to be a singular unit. Every place that you see that something is desirous of its opposite, that is because that which is searching, which is desiring, is become perfected in the matter that they're being attracted to. And because that gives them perfection, and that's what your definition of love is. The Maharal gives definitions of love. Okay? In other words, that which is going to, we don't even realize at times, but we always are drawn. God placed within us always a desire to make things better for ourselves. That's the way the world functions. Right? The world gets to be a better place because people are always trying to tamper with the world to make it a better place, hopefully. And that, therefore, is going to be a definition of ahava according to the Maharal. So if you're in a room that's cold, you're going to try to you're always looking, you're hungry, you try to eat. Like we're always trying to perfect ourselves. That's true on a physical level. That's also true, obviously, on some kind of, friendships are based upon that. That's a lot of times you see that an extrovert will have and an introvert become best of buddies. It's because they complete each other. In equilibrium. Yeah, we don't like extremes. This world doesn't go for
I
extremes.
think I'm in the right direction, but tell me if not. Everything I heard. But let's go back to World War II. It's not that far ago.
Okay.
6 million, by the highest country or culture in Europe, did what they did to the Jews. How?
What's the
No,
question exactly?
The question is that how Kadosh Baruch Hu can allow that to happen,
That's
all
like
these comments and all the
That's-
wisdom and all these.
But that's like a different topic, right? Isn't that like that's the question that how can you happen that we're all been running to unfortunately
to
So, okay,
Levias.
so what are you saying? Maybe that I want to clarify a bit more about
I'm-
what you said until now.
I'm talking about why that gets into why is there bad in this world, and especially
Yeah.
gets into why is Am Yisrael, having
Yeah.
a tough time along the way. That's already a different question. That's a challenging philosophical
But
discussion.
that wasn't part of the...
No, this is just
Maharal?
talking about the Maharal's just talking about the concepts of Yira and Ahava as it applies. We have these concepts in spite of all the challenges that we have facing us both as a nation, as individuals, when bad things happen to good people. In spite of that, that's something that we have to wrestle with throughout life. But in addition to that, but on an everyday living, how do you understand the concepts of having fear of God and the love of God? On everyday living, I have an understanding that b'chol ofen, in spite of everything, I exist because God keeps me here. And in addition, the Maharal is going to say that I'm drawn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? And this is his definition of Ahava. What's Ahava? That what I'm completed in. Now, the last time I checked, that which is by definition perfect, there's only one thing that is by definition perfect. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God. So that means if I'm imperfect and I want to achieve perfection, so where am I going to find that perfection? By God. Now if God made us, if we're cold, we put on a sweater, equilibrium, you said. So if I, as an imperfect being, want to achieve perfection, then I'm drawn to connecting up with God. That being drawn to God is what is that? That's the definition of Ahava, according to the Maharal. Anytime you're drawn to something to perfect yourself, that's
You do the mitzvahs.
Ahava.
You do the mitzvahs. You're showing the love for Hashem. When you do the mitzvahs, because you want to do things that He wants. You're making Him happy by the fact that you're.
Nachas ruach LaKadosh Baruch Hu. So these are all terminologies, right? Everybody's like sort of dancing around with the different. But I get right. When I grew up, I didn't learn Maharal. When I grew up in America. And I know where everybody's from, but a lot of us.
Not from America.
Where are you from?
You were spared. I'm from Yonkers, New York. Yonkers, New York. Is anybody from Yonkers? You from Yonkers? Nearby.
I'm from the
Who
Bronx.
talks about? That counts. That's the grandpapa. I grew up in Yonkers, right near Vancouver Parkway, South Yonkers. So when I was growing up, so why do we do what is Torah about? God gave us the Torah to do mitzvahs. That's what the world's about. It's that simple. No questions, no trying to figure out. But Maharal, precedes us by 500 years. He's talking about it. Hasidus is a lot based on the Maharals. There's a lot in Hasidus that's from the Maharal. A lot of the machshava that we work with nowadays is really Maharal. People don't even know where it's coming from. But it's Maharal. He was the first because he gets an idea and then he strings along tons of Gemaras and Midrashim that come to explain his idea. So Maharal over here is just talking about definition of love. I understand what you're saying, but that's not gonna. That doesn't. If given a person has emunah in spite of faith after the Holocaust, right? Berkowitz says faith after the Holocaust. If I have faith after the Holocaust, and I'm a believing Jew and I'm a Torah observant Jew, so I'm going to have to deal with the philosophical issues of why some bad things happen. But on a personal level, and for Am Yisrael, but on a personal level, how do I relate to God? So according to the Maharal, I'm not falling in fear from God's infinite wisdom, and that's not drawing me in either. What is drawing me in is an awareness. I have an awareness that this world is here because Hashem keeps it going. He's constantly propping it up. And I'm here because God's constantly propping me up. And if God for a second didn't want me to be here, then I disappear in a moment. And because I recognize that I'm so dependent on God for everything, therefore, and I'm imperfect, I am drawn naturally, maybe cognitively or not, consciously or not, but I'm drawn to God because as an imperfect being, I want to perfect myself. And perfection is found in God. That's the approach according to the Maharal. It's going to come out that according to the Maharal, that Yir and Ahava are really they're both the same side, like they're both sides of the same coin. I'm not going to have the coming close and falling back. It's because if it's an if then, who's the computer pro? If then, or how's that go? If then, huh?
If then.
If then else. That's the only thing I remember from. I also studied computers.
Amazing.
If I have Yirat Hashem,
God awareness. Then I have Ahavat Hashem. One leads to the next. So therefore, if I'm standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if I'm going to walk therefore in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so what? Okay, so let's go back to. So he had at the very beginning. Let's think about davening, by the way, in a very, 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 very broad umbrella. But we start out the morning. You mentioned Moda'ani. I start out saying thank you because that's what Jews are about. That's one of my Rosh Hashiva used to say. The greatest midah, character trait that God wants to see is hakaras hatov, is being gracious. That was his thing. Moshe's not going to hit the Nile because he's gracious. When I say goodbye, anybody who made Aliyah long enough. It used to be, you could know when a person made Aliyah based upon the car that they were driving. So there was a whole bunch of people around with the Mitsubishi vans. Remember that one? Mitsubishi vans? That was in the 80s. I drove a Peugeot station wagon. Did anybody go back that far enough? Remember those Peugeot station wagons? That's what I drove. It lasted for 24 years. It was still running, but you never knew when. Like it was the literal that I popped the hood and take bubble gum and. There was a screw that kept coming out. So if I push it back in, then the car would run. So it wasn't dependable. It's reliable at some point. So I had to get rid of it. When they took my car away after 24 years, I didn't cry, but you're right. I patted it on the hood. I said thank you very much. You brought all my kids home from the hospital, and I was like. You're gonna put me away, I know. But I was sincere about it. I felt that this car deserved a thank you. Yeah. Anybody ever use ChatGPT? The OpenAI? I sometimes, when it gives me a great answer, I'll write thank you. I know it's a computer, but I have to write thank you. It's like, why? Because it's not about the computer or who I'm talking to. I'm talking about to my car, but it's about me. Right? This thing serviced me. So Moshe's not going to smack the Nile. He's not going to smack the dirt either. Aaron has to do that. What?
But he smacked the rock.
But he smacked the rock. It didn't.
Furious.
It didn't. But it didn't save him, and he was told to the first time around. So that's this idea of Hakar Satov. So says the Maharal. Oh, so why am I getting? So that's how we start off. The Moda'anis, the Baruch, all those Baruch in the beginning. We saying thank you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That okay. We're now running. What's Pesukei de Zimra? It's two themes. This is what it says to me. This is Maharal. This is what it seems like to me. So you could argue with me 100%. What's the two basic themes in Pesukei de Zimra?
Butter up the Lord.
Praise.
What kind of praise? Based on what?
Gratitude.
What's the Hallelujahs?
Oh,
Yeah, God of divine.
that's the
The God of design.
But that's not so. The fact is,
I think it's Hashemayim Shem Sapim Kvol Kel, all that kind of stuff.
why?
And then at the end of Pesukei de Zimra, what do we come into?
What we want.
No, the end of Pesukei de Zimra, what do we get into?
Praise him.
Oz Yashir, and right before Oz Yashir also, we're talking about praise through what? What are we looking at? We start out from Avram Avinu. We go through a quick history of the Jewish people. In my mind, it's like we start with the God of design, that's the Hallelujahs, and afterwards we get into the God of Jewish history. So we got an understanding. I got God awareness. Boom. Then I walk into Birchas Kriyat Shema. I have to get certain tenets of faith out there. Then I walk into Shemona Esrei. That's what it says to me. I look off this Maharal, and it's saying to me, this is going to be your structure of prayer on a daily basis. I'm building God awareness, and then that's going to draw me into, Ahavat Hashem. If you're at Hashem, then Ahavat Hashem. Where's Ahavat Hashem? That's Shema Yisrael. V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha. You ever see Shema written out in a linear siddur? You should love God when you walk on the streets, and when you get up in the morning, and when you go to sleep at night, and when you're talking to your kids. It should be on your doorpost. It should be on your gatepost. When it's linear, they break it apart for us. What is it saying? What's that describing? The Rambam says, that's love sickness. Every aspect of your day. That's the demand upon us. And if love, then I'm ready to be makabel upon myself all malchut shemayim. And then I'm makabel upon myself all mitzvot. Then I take upon myself the demand because I wanna relate to the person I love, do what they want. I don't want to disappoint a God. So I take upon myself the all mitzvahs. That's the second paragraph of Shema. Then I start remembering about that's the purpose of the Jewish people. I'm with the Jewish people. Zechel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Third paragraph of Shema. Boom, straight into. Then I take my 3 steps forward. I'm standing in front of God. Now I have a lot to talk about. So I get myself in the zone by starting out the beginning of Shemona Esrei with the avot, and then with the praise of God, and then I get into all these requests that are written in
Lashon Rabin. How do you say that? Plural. Written in plural. Because I'm relating to the Jewish people. We'll get back to this the next time when we do the Nefesh. But that's how davening works in my mind, according to the Maharal. Now, what was the original question of the Maharal? It was the paradox. If I deserve something, then I get it without asking. And if I don't deserve it, how is it that I'm just saying these prayers? How's that going to help? So the Maharal says, you know what happens in prayer? It's not the prayer per se. What's happening when we stand in prayer? We work on prayers like it's a real. That's why the people used to. Gemara tells us that Mishnayos that they used to sit for an hour before, for time before davening, and after, like you think you get through. So you have a good prayer, you think you're through. So what happens in prayer, says the Maharal, it's not the prayer itself per se. What's happening? It is that by relating in the prayer properly, in other words, if I understand that I have God aware, if I have an understanding, Yirat Hashem and Ahavat Hashem, if I have an awareness of God, and an awareness that I'm totally dependent upon God for everything, this world, if I get that clear, and I'm drawn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so when I pray, the prayer is going to be a vehicle to have me be able to be closer in, to have greater understanding, to be relating, to build that awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that in itself will help me be closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then it comes out that this level of closeness will open me more up to the constant benevolence that is coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not the words per se, but it's the effect that the words have. It's, in other words, I'm expressing myself to God, and that's going to deepen within me my understanding of my God awareness and my dependence on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's going to open me up more be meritorious, more meritorious to receive that which is needed to function in this world properly. That is going to be that's the Wallflower idea according to the Maharal. The Wallflower meaning, I don't know what Wallflower is. I think it has something to do with putting, wallpaper on your right, the Wallflower. But that's basically saying that I understand I'm totally dependent on Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's a little bit in Chassidus they'll write about bittul. I'm negated in front of God. Like I'm like the hashtachavaya, the bowing down. What's the idea of bowing down? That on Yom Kippur, I'm totally on the floor. Like there's nothing. I'm not there. And it's an understanding of myself compared to God that I'm just on the floor there. So that's an idea of total tlut, a total dependency upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when I understand that more and I express that more, that's why you have to speak out your tefillah. When I express that more, that I have that greater understanding, then that's going to develop me further to be able to reach higher levels and thus open myself up to the answers to the brachas. Because so that's the Maharal. We still have to do next time when they invite me back. We'll do the next piece. Actually, you could okay. We go. I don't want. You know what? I could ask.
The question I would raise is: you said if you're entitled to it, why do you have to ask for it? What are you entitled to?
That's a good question. Also, we're not entitled to anything. That's right.
Ask for it, and that gives you the opportunity to say.
But we do. But you do see that. Okay. So thank you is also. Thank you also. There's so many different aspects to tefillah, but the point is we do get things without asking for it. Because God probably, if you want to take not that I'm entitled to it, you could say that I get things because God, that's called kalim, right? In the Bali Musa, we'll talk about kalim. I get things in this world because God wants to give me the abilities to function properly and do good, give over chesed, and that's going to get down to kalim. So the same thing I would say, the more you have that God awareness and have a greater recognition of what you're supposed to be doing in this world, will open you up to receive more benevolence, more blessings that you should be able to function better in this world. And let's say it's not for because you want it, because you want to be able to do more good in this world. That's a fair way of organizing. Anyway, it's always so much fun. Thank you very, very much. See you guys.
Wow.
Huh? Okay, to that.